Well, good morning, you beautiful New Zealanders. Here is another great video for you. We're in our series called The Treaty for Dummies, and we're still in Article 1 of the treaty, and this is part 5 of Article 1, because there's a lot to say about Article 1 in the treaty. It's crucial. It's the article about sovereignty. And of course, suddenly, in the last few days, everybody's coming out talking about sovereignty, whether Maori ceded sovereignty or not. And so it is now the topic of the moment. Well, did Maori cede sovereignty or not? Well, today we're going to answer more on that question. In the Article 1 Part 4 video, in other words, the previous video that I've done to this one, I discussed what it would mean for New Zealand if Maori did not cede sovereignty, what it would mean for New Zealand if Maori did cede sovereignty. Then I said there were 9 proofs that Maori ceded sovereignty. I detailed the first 4 of these 9 proofs. They were the existence of the treaty, the speeches of the chiefs, the 1860 Kohimarama Conference, and the documented evidence from records inside the British Parliament. Now, any one of those 4 proofs is compelling evidence that Maori ceded sovereignty, but in combination, they're absolutely incontrovertible. Today, I'm going to detail another 2 proofs, as if 1 to 4 were not enough. Let's do another 2. And today, I actually want to introduce a brand new term to us. It's the term a reversalist. What does this mean? Well, in 1840, without question, the chiefs ceded sovereignty. A reversalist is someone who wants to reverse that decision made by those chiefs. They say, that is, the reversalists say, the chiefs did not cede sovereignty in 1840, the opposite of what the chiefs in 1840 actually said. So let's begin today by watching a short video of reversalists in action. They include ex-Prime Minister Chris Hipkins. In this video, you'll also see people who oppose the reversalist, including Sean Plunkett, who does a brilliant job, and Chris Luxon. Watch. Alright, this is a really interesting video because it's a collage of a whole lot of people who are reversalists, and you've got Sean Plunkett, who's not one of those, and Sean is trying to fight the good fight and hold the line, so you'll see a bit of him in a minute, but let's watch this together.
Last week, the Prime Minister told Parliament he believed Maori ceded sovereignty to the Crown after questioning from Green co-leader Chloe Swarbrick.
Does the Prime Minister believe that Maori ceded sovereignty?
I just say to the member, we have a Treaty of Waitangi as the founding document of New Zealand. In there is protection for both Crown and Maori interests. The position is very clear. The Crown, Maori ceded sovereignty to the Crown.
Okay, notice that Chris Luxon says that the treaty gives protection for both Maori and the Crown. Now, why didn't he mention the other 159 cultures in New Zealand? Because the answer is that Luxon believes that the treaty is a partnership, and he's completely wrong about that. It is not a partnership. You cannot be sovereign and have partners. And so he sees a bicultural New Zealand. This is through the eyes of Chris Luxon. He sees a bicultural New Zealand, Maori and the rest, and he sees the treaty as a partnership, and so it's Maori and the rest, Maori and the other partners, which is the Crown. And that leads to the thought that in Chris's mind that Maorification and co-governance is quite acceptable in New Zealand, and he's promoting both of those on turbo. So Chris Luxon is a huge big problem. He also does not understand that in Article 3 of the treaty, Maori were levelled in the sense of becoming British citizens and so equal with everybody else. Chris doesn't understand that, and so he is a very mixed up man when it comes to understanding the treaty. And although he said Maori ceded sovereignty, he has no idea what that actually means, which is exactly why I spelt out in the last video what it means if Maori ceded sovereignty and what it means if Maori did not cede sovereignty. So please watch that last video, part 4 of the series, if you missed that. Chris needs to watch this and study it carefully because he is all at sea and all mixed up when it comes to the treaty.
Maori cede sovereignty?
Well, no.
Okay, we can expect that from Chris Hipkins because he is history ignorant and he's dangerous and he is a real worry. If he becomes the Prime Minister in the next Parliament, oh my goodness, New Zealand is going to implode because he is not a scholar, he does not know the treaty, and he is spraying around all his treaty ignorance everywhere, and I tell you what, it's so messy. And here comes Sean Plunkett, and he is interviewing a guy called Helmut Modig. Very interesting interview.
No way you sign a deal with a colonial power and you're not ceding sovereignty.
Well, depends on
and the problem is, if you ceded sovereignty, you can't have partnership.
Well,
I don't have partnership with the Crown. I'm just a citizen of the government of New Zealand.
Yeah.
You've got the same rights as me, right?
I mean, if I could just say it.
Okay, so Sean Sean puts you in a very good position there. He says you can't cede sovereignty and be partners, and he's absolutely 100% right. It's brilliant, in fact. He's really, really good, Sean Plunkett. And then this guy, Helmut Modik, he trots out a line that a lot of the Maori activists use, which was, how can 100,000 Maori just give over the country to 2,000 motley settlers? And why would they do that? It doesn't make sense. Now, they all sit around, these activists, and they talk together, and they use this line a lot. Here's another example of an activist. This is Margaret Mutu and her offsider here, her interviewer, and they are discussing the treaty, and they say exactly the same thing as Helmut says, slightly different in the numbers, but same concept. So have a listen to this.
So in some circles in this country, there's many believe that Queen Victoria was offered sovereignty over an entire civilization. Is this realistic?
No. And for this one, it's totally, that assumption is totally unrealistic, illogical, and it just simply didn't happen. And the reason is really quite simple. All you have to do is just step yourself back into the reality of 1840. You had in this country, demographers will say that you had between 70 and 90,000 people here. They were just counting who was along the coastline. I would say that there were several 100,000 of us here in 1840. And then in the north mainly, but some in Waikato as well, you had a handful, less than 2,000 Pākehā. So I'm not quite sure what logic you would employ to think that those several 100,000 Maori who were in complete control of every corner of this country would suddenly decide that because a handful of those 2,000 who had come here were misbehaving, that therefore we would give our power and our authority, our mana, to them or to their rangatira. It just, human beings don't do that. You don't give away your existence, the whole world in which you operate, the legal system under which you operate. You do not give it away to somebody who you've never met, who lives on the other side of the world and knows absolutely nothing about you and doesn't even speak your language. So there's that. And in terms of being totally outnumbered, why on earth do you think people would even contemplate, those handful of badly behaved ones, maybe a couple of hundred or so, living up in Kororareka, Russell, misbehaving, and therefore you give them and their boss complete control over your country? It just defies logic. It flies in the face of human nature completely. And the claim, when you look at that claim, you just think to yourself, come on, it just doesn't make any sense.
And the reason that Maori ceded sovereignty, there were three major reasons. One is that Maori were terrified of the French, and they wanted the protection of the British to protect them from the French, who they thought were going to come back and take over New Zealand. The second reason is that Maori were self-annihilating. Between 1800 and 1840, the Maori population went from 150,000 to 75,000, and Matthew Wright, the historian, says that Maori fought themselves to a standstill and they cried out to the British for help. Maori had been in this country for 700 years. They were described as a petty, tribal, warring group of people who had no national unity, no government, and basically they had not been able to form a government themselves anywhere at any time. And also, they just needed help, and they cried out to the British for that help. And the third reason is they wanted what the British had. They wanted British goods, they wanted British trade, and they wanted to move into the modern world. And so those were the three major drivers for Maori ceding sovereignty. There were others, but those were the major three. And so this guy, Helmut Modik, he doesn't understand that whatsoever. He's obviously hasn't read any history at all.
Another way. The idea that 2,000 Europeans here in this country, surrounded by 100,000 warlike natives, fiercely independent, managed to prevail on them, that they would surrender the ability to govern themselves, that just doesn't even make sense. They did. No, that's what people say they did.
That's what happened.
Sean Plunkett is absolutely right. He says that's what happened, and actually that's what happened. That is exactly what happened. Maori ceded sovereignty, and that's why we're going through it. And by the way, the reason that I have painted out the scenario if Maori did not cede sovereignty and if Maori did cede sovereignty, that's really, really important, because it's very easy to roll off your lips, or Maori didn't cede sovereignty or Maori did cede sovereignty, but do we know what that actually means? Chris Luxon doesn't know what it means, and everybody needs to know what that means. What does it mean to cede sovereignty? It's hugely important, so please pay particular attention to that. Okay, so now we have a collage of what I call reversalists, and let's hear what they have to say.
undisputed that the treaty is actually the Maori text of the treaty.
So she says the treaty is actually the Maori text of the treaty, and I completely agree with her in that analysis of what she has just said. She is 100% right. The Maori version is the treaty. However, in the 1975 Treaty of Waitangi Act, there is a Maori version and there is what we call the English version of the treaty. The trouble is, this so-called English version of the treaty is not actually the final English draft of the treaty at all. It's what we call the rogue James Freeman version of the treaty. In this description of this video, I give an explanation of how this version of the treaty came into being. It's a rogue version of the treaty. The authentic, bona fide English version of the treaty is the final English draft of the treaty, which was penned by James Busby. It's come to be known as the Littlewood Draft. It tells us in English what the Maori version is saying in Maori perfectly. So if you want to know what the Maori version says, read the Littlewood Draft. We could say that the two versions are a perfect match. I have left a description of how this final English draft came into being in the description of this video too. So please read this carefully. So where is the Littlewood Draft today? Well, under pressure from activists, it's hidden away deep in the back of Archives New Zealand, shamefully. One of my personal goals is to get it out of there and have it instated as the official treaty in English. If this happens, the activists will be stopped from continuously and fraudulently manipulating the meaning of the treaty. Okay, back to the rogue James Freeman version of the treaty. Why did activists in 1975 insist that this version be inserted into the Treaty of Waitangi Act as, quote, the official English version of the treaty? Well, they were being cunning and devious, as they always are. Because the rogue James Freeman version is drastically different in content and meaning compared with the treaty in Maori, the activists were able to say, quote, the translators did a bad job translating the treaty from English to Maori in 1840, or we'll have to do a back translation for you to tell you what the treaty really says in English, unquote. See what they're up to? In this way, the activists were able to fraudulently manipulate the treaty to say what they wanted it to say, and that's been going on since 1975, so they set it up to be able to do that way back then. So let's keep watching this video.
The Maori version was the only version that was debated and discussed.
Actually, no. The Maori version was not the only version that was debated and discussed, because on the 5th of February 1840, the treaty was read in English and Maori to the chiefs who were in that tent, so that the chiefs could check the translation of English to Maori to make sure it was accurate. Many of the chiefs could speak English fluently, see? So he's not right about that one.
And the Maori version tells us clearly, linked to the Declaration of Independence, that we did not, could not, would not have ceded our sovereignty. Why would you cede your sovereignty to a motley bunch of 2,000 Europeans who were living here at the time?
See, there's the same line trotted out by the guy who was being interviewed by Sean Plunkett. Now, this fellow who just spoke, he used the same line. They use this. They trot it out. They've learnt it together. And they say, let's all use this together. And by the way, the Declaration of Independence, 52 chiefs signed that, and the British went out of their way to make sure that those 52 chiefs who signed the Declaration of Independence 1835 also signed the treaty, so one superseded the other. That's the story of the Declaration of Independence. The treaty cancelled out or superseded the Declaration of Independence, and that's a fact. So he's way off on that as well. Let's keep listening.
Never ceded sovereignty. If the word mana had been used instead to translate the English version, which was very definitely about ceding sovereignty to the British Crown, then no chief would have signed.
Okay, so she says, oh, the chiefs would never have signed, never have ceded sovereignty. Well, you know what? Henry Williams was the missionary who went up into Titi'i Marae on the night of the 5th of February with all of those chiefs, 1840. And all night he discussed it with them to make sure they understood. And he is quoted as saying that he was absolutely certain that the Maori chiefs understood what sovereignty meant, and that in signing they ceded sovereignty. So Henry Williams, here's the actual quote. Henry Williams reported to Bishop Selwyn, quote, the instruction of Captain Hobson was not to allow anyone to sign the treaty till he fully understood it, to which instruction I did most strictly attend. That the natives to whom I explained the treaty understood the nature of the same, there can be no doubt, and there's the reference. So what he's saying is, all night on the 5th of February 1840, Henry Williams and his son went up into the marae with all those chiefs, and he explained to them what kawanatanga meant, what ceding sovereignty meant, and we know that from the speeches on the 5th of February that they knew anyway, but they were clarified on the night of the 5th of February. So what this lady is saying is complete nonsense. It's just crap. It doesn't fit with history. It doesn't fit with the facts. And you can also understand that from the speeches of the chiefs, as we have discussed, that Maori knew what sovereignty was. This woman saying that, oh, you know, if they'd used the word mana instead of sovereignty, kawanatanga is actually the word for sovereignty. If they'd used the word mana, it all would have been different. No. The chiefs fully understood what ceding sovereignty meant, and it was explained to them on the 5th of February 1840. So this lady's talking, or that lady is talking absolute nonsense. She's just making it up. See, this is the thing. When you look at what these activists say, they have no facts. They don't study, and all they have is opinion. They never are able to back up what they say with facts, with proof. No proofs, just opinions, just speculations. That's all they have. They don't have any substance to what they say. So we need to be aware of that.
So we've been able to now look at it fairly rationally and look at their actions, say from 1831, 1834, 1835, 1840. And then after that, in 1847, 1850s, you find all the Maori leaders, the next generations afterwards, all singing the same song. We did not cede sovereignty.
Oh, that's the biggest lie that I have ever heard. You see, what is the truth that undoes that great lie that this man has just uttered? The Kohimarama Conference. How many chiefs were there? 112 chiefs. What did they all do? They all affirmed the Queen's sovereignty. Remember that? I've been through that in the beginning of this video. So this man needs to have a 2-foot nose telling the biggest porky. And notice, you know, when you listen to all of these reversalists, as I said, they don't have any facts. They have no proofs. They just have opinions. What is he talking about going through 1831, 1835, 1837? And you know, they rattle off something, but so what? And then he comes out with the clanger that through into the 1850s, all the Maori were singing from the same song sheet that they didn't cede sovereignty. Well, I'm sorry, but this is absolute, it's crap. And they're getting away with it. And this brings me to the point that we need to know what the treaty really says, and we really need to know our proofs and our evidence that Maori ceded sovereignty, so that when we hear lies like this, and we hear people spouting off about stupid things, we actually can pick up the lies because we know the truth. We cannot know what a lie is unless we know the truth. Think about that. So we're all learning, and I'm training everybody, and I'm being trained by other people so that we know the truth. Why? So that we can detect lies and error quickly. That's what it's all about. Well, wasn't that the most absolutely fascinating interview and video with those reversalists? Because it gives you an insight into how they think, what they're thinking, and how they operate. And honestly, it's interesting. So I've given you 4 proofs that Maori ceded sovereignty, and we have 5 more to go. So what is the 5th proof? Well, here is an amazing Maori chief in 1840. His name is Tamati Wakanene, and there is his headstone, and that is in the church at Russell in the Bay of Islands. And so let's talk about him. At the church in Russell in Northland, there is the headstone of Tamati Wakanene, the father of all the chiefs. He was an amazing man. He was the dominant speaker at Waitangi on the 5th of February 1840 at Waitangi. Scholars often point out that it was because of his speech that most of the chiefs ended up signing the Treaty of Waitangi. He was very influential. Like I say, he was the chief of the chiefs. Take a moment to read what is written on his headstone. It's worth reading because it's amazing. Those are compelling words, aren't they? The words on this headstone tell us what Tamati Wakanene thought happened at Waitangi on the 6th of February 1840. Maori ceded sovereignty. How then can the reversalists of today say that the chiefs in 1840 did not cede sovereignty after they have read this headstone? I mean, really, how can Tamati Wakanene, an eyewitness and signatory to the treaty on the 6th of February 1840, be wrong, and the reversalists living 184 years after Waitangi be right? How can they say, oh, we know better? They can't. Not if they're open people, intellectually open, emotionally open, and wanting to really seek the truth. It can only be that they are in denial, the reversalists. So that's what they are. They're in denial, which is not just a river in Egypt. Okay, what is the 6th proof that Maori ceded sovereignty? Remember, we've got 9 in total, so we're up to number 6. The 6th proof, one of the greatest proofs that Maori ceded sovereignty comes from New Zealand's greatest Maori scholar, Sir Aparananata. He was a politician in the 1920s and 30s. He got a law degree in 2 years instead of 3. He was very bright. He was also a lawyer and sometimes stood in as the Deputy Prime Minister. In Parliament, he was called the Father of the House. Fluent in Te Reo, he travelled the maraes of New Zealand teaching Maori about the treaty. He said, quote, "What remains of the Treaty of Waitangi? What is there in the treaty that the Maori can today celebrate wholeheartedly with you? Let me say one thing. Clause 1 of the treaty handed over the mana and sovereignty of New Zealand to Queen Victoria and her descendants forever." Now, he's telling Maori to celebrate that. It was a wonderful thing. It was a beautiful thing. But what are Maori doing today? What are the reversalists doing? Nothing but complaining. Nothing but complaining, pulling out the victim card. Man, have we gone backwards. And notice that he uses the word mana. See? That lady in the video we've just watched, she picked out that word. Saraparananata says they ceded their mana. They knew what they were doing. See? That's why you need to know history. It's obvious, isn't it? Saraparananata considered that Maori ceded sovereignty at Waitangi. Only a fool would poo-poo his judgment on this issue, and that's what the reversalists are doing. That's what all the people who are crying out Maori did not cede sovereignty, they're fools, truly. And there's the reference. So how can this be so that they poo-poo Saraparananata? How then can the reversalists of today say that the chiefs in 1840 did not cede sovereignty when they read this quote from Saraparananata? I want you to know he was born in 1874, only 40 years after the treaty was signed. The reversalists are living 184 years after the event, yet they say, oh, they know better than Saraparananata about what really happened in 1840. Really? Come on. Some even suggest that Saraparananata would have actually met some of the chiefs in person who signed the treaty in 1840. Why are the reversalists committed to their position that Maori did not cede sovereignty regardless of the evidence to the contrary? Well, when you think about it, it can only be that they are blindly committed to taking over the country regardless of facts and proofs which refute their currently held view. That is, that Maori did not cede sovereignty. See, they're not interested in facts and proofs and the truth. That's less important to them. What's important is they get going and achieve their goal. So we'd have to summarize by saying that these reversalists are just blindly committed to takeover. That's what they're about. So here are the 6 proofs out of the 9. We've got the existence of the treaty. We've got the speeches of the chiefs. We've got the Kohimarama Conference 1860. We've got the documented evidence from records inside the British Parliament. We've got the headstone of Tamati Wakanene, and we've got the opinion of Saraparananata, New Zealand's greatest Maori. Well, I'll give you number 7, 8, and 9, and they're real doozies in the next video. But let's keep moving here, because we've discovered about the reversalists so far that they showed little evidence that they have done any serious study. This is the people who claim that, including Chris Hipkins and others, a lot of others, that Maori did not cede sovereignty. They live in denial of historical facts. They often lie about the treaty, what it says and means, that last guy on the video. Their arguments are replete with opinions and speculations, but little or no fact. In fact, I haven't heard any facts from any of them, ever. Have you? I don't know. I can't find any. It's always opinions and speculations. They don't approach the treaty as scholars would, sifting evidence. Reasonable and open people change their position when confronted with irrefutable proofs which challenge their existing thinking, don't they? Is that not true or not? The reversalists do not do this. Instead, they just dig in, they double down. Thus, they show they're blindly committed to takeover. So what's the solution? Where do we go from here? I don't want you to get depressed. They can be stopped if enough New Zealanders rise up and resist their moves to take control of New Zealand. Don't rely on the politicians, they're not going to do it. We have to do this ourselves. David Seymour's bill has the potential to stop the takeover in its tracks. This is why we must support it. So let's just do a quick review of David's bill. There's David, and we're going to talk about his bill. David Seymour's Principles Bill brings us as a nation to a fork in the road in our history. In my view, it's the most significant bill to be debated by all New Zealanders since 1840. This bill is going to ask Kiwis whether they want to take a left turn or a right turn at that fork in the road. Now, that bus called New Zealand is already well and truly on the left-hand road. It's just a matter of how deep and far we want to go down that road, and now's an opportunity to actually turn right. So if David's bill is unsuccessful, what's going to happen? Well, the bus is going to go further and deeper down into that left turn. And what does that mean? It means tribal rule, means class society, Maori and the rest, means one law for Maori and another for everyone else, means apartheid, separatism and racism. It means we dishonour the treaty. We've just talked about that. If we take a right-hand turn, if David's bill is successful, then what are we going to get? We're going to get democracy. We're going to get the rule of the people through votes, voting and elections. We're going to get equality. All are equal in the country, no matter who you are, no matter what the colour of your skin. We're going to get one law for all. We're going to get a colourblind society, and we're definitely going to honour the treaty. So here are 2 questions. Which one of these 2 roads is mandated in the treaty? Well, I've kind of answered that. Number 2, which one of these 2 roads honours the treaty? Well, I've answered that as well. We know what it is. It's the right-hand turn. So we must support David's bill because as though our lives depend on it. So let's just summarise here. Does David Seymour's bill honour the treaty? Let's see. Here are his 3 principles. The New Zealand government has the right to govern all New Zealanders. Oh my goodness, who could disagree with that? Only a madman. The New Zealand government will honour all New Zealanders in the chieftainship of their land and all their property. Who would argue with that? That everybody can be secure in their house and the land that they own? What nutcase would argue against that? And that all New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties? Again, you'd have to be an absolute nutcase not to agree with that. You'd have to be insane not to agree with those three. Well, when we look at those three principles that David's going to have in his bill, we can see that actually they align nicely with the preamble of the treaty. They also align nicely with Article 1 of the treaty. So far, so good. David's bill honours the treaty in every respect if we consider it in light of the preamble in the treaty and Article 1 of the treaty. All right, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and share this video with everyone everywhere. And I'll see you in the next video for proofs number 7, 8, and 9, the last three. You're going to enjoy those. See you then. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your generosity, those who are giving to this cause and are helping us go forwards, and also those who are giving out cards. Giving out cards has gone absolutely ballistic, and we're so thrilled about that because the word's getting out and we're making fantastic progress thanks to you. So hats off to you guys. Well done.